Hello, good evening, and welcome to the final Sunday night breakdown of the season. And we're doing it on a Tuesday just for randomness. Yeah, so full apologies to those of you on Twitter who's going, "Where's Sunday night breakdown?" I have managed to trap a nerve, which has given me an entirely numb and painful arm, and hence why we were delayed. 8.5 hours in accident and emergency yesterday meant we couldn't do the Monday night that we were planning on, Dave.
Yeah, send your donations to Dan, everybody.
Indeed. So let's take a look back at the playoff final. Let's have a quick look at the women's game. First of all, London Lions 57, Leicester Riders 41. And because I had this injury, well, I did it Saturday, but Sunday morning in a lot of pain. They gave me a lot of drugs. Didn't quite numb the pain of this game. I mean, of my arm during this game. This is not one they'll be rerunning in 20 years' time, I think it's fair to say.
No, it was pretty grim.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean the shooting percentages were woeful. And obviously sometimes that can be defense, and sometimes that can be the stage and the fact that they're tipping off at 1 o'clock and they're playing in a gym that they haven't played in before. So all those things kind of feed into it. But the selling point of the women's game is shooting. It's not, it is a skill level, and it's not. They don't obviously the athleticism level is below the rim, but naturally, and the physicality is important. But if you were drawing a comparison, which we hate to do, but if you were drawing a comparison in the women's and the men's game, the level of skillfulness and their ability to make shots really has a disproportionate impact on the game as opposed to the other stuff. And no one could make a shot.
No.
And I mean, basically, Snitsina was the only one I thought when the ball left her hand, it was going in. Nobody else. And
she missed a lot too.
She missed a lot too, yeah. And because both teams were well drilled and disciplined and physically committed, it was basically a bit of a stalemate.
Yeah. So first run of the game was a 13-0 run by London, which put them 17-8 up. Leicester then had their best spell of the game at the start of the second quarter, 10-2 start, pulled the lead back down, but then a 10-0 response from London, 31-20. And to be honest with you, with the field goal shooting percentages, Leicester didn't have enough offense to get back from there, and London didn't make enough shots really to blow them out.
Yeah, and I mean, I've seen both teams a couple of times this year. Leicester, a very egalitarian offensive team. The ball moves around, the big step outside, and then cut. What they didn't really have against, again, and to be fair, this is what basically every WBBL team has had a problem against London in scoring against their athleticism and size. But what they didn't really have was, right, we're going to get the ball here, and this is our plan. Right, so is it going to be Arlen? Are we going to throw it to Arlen in the post 4 times in a row and she's going to score? Are we going to run it square screen and rolls, or she's going to score? Instead, the ball was popping, but there was very little opportunity. There was very little in the way of kind of quality offense created by it. And that's where you almost want to simplify and just like, where's my mismatch? Where am I going to go? I need a basket now. And you never quite got into a rhythm whereby you thought this is a person in the Leicester team who's going to take it upon themselves to come back into the game and pull them back. In relation to London's defense, London's depth, just a little bit better than Leicester's. What that meant was London got more cheap points. And London didn't shoot the ball, at all. But they got cheaper points, and to be fair, they looked more together than they did in the last final. When it looked like a less than happy camp. But they played pretty hard in this final, and they looked together in what they did. So, just a bit of depth, extra, probably 10 cheap points that Leicester didn't get, and unfortunately, that kind of, that was an Imperial Death March game, because it was just a repetitive droning. You're not going to catch up with us because you're not going to score enough points to reach us.
Yeah.
once they got 14 ahead.
Yeah.
Yeah, pretty. Yeah, I mean, we look back now and we haven't really had a good final, a good women's final for 2 years. And I don't remember the ones in the bubble. If they did them, I can't remember. But the last 2 years, the finals have been pretty dispiriting spectacles. I noticed Krumesh talked in the press conference afterwards about disparity in the league and the disparity in some of the venues that they play at, and and effectively disparity. What he's talking about is disparity between amateur and professional. And they're not nice words, they're not good words, because amateur means you don't get paid and professional means you do, and there's always something in between. But in relation to the level of structure around, obviously the WBBL has the benefit or the curse of having more teams than the BBL.
Yeah.
So, it's just the ever continuing question in British basketball has been one of expansion against contraction.
Yeah.
Ever since, we'll continue to continue, and the people who think there's 10 is too few and people who think that 12 is too many will continue to argue. It's a little bit, like the Eurasians and the East Asians from 1984. That's the last Orwellian reference.
Yeah.
There will never be a consensus. But what he said was, effectively, that we can't be playing in school gyms anymore. And there's a as more basketball facilities hopefully come online, there's a strength to that argument, I have to say. There have been too many games this year which London have won by upwards of 70 points, which are basically under 14 scores.
Yeah.
And you cannot have that disparity of level if you're asking people to come and pay to watch. Forget whether it makes it a good league, bad league, or whatever. Forget who's got to come up or who's got to come down to whatever standard. If you're asking people to pay to watch, then they're entitled to some form of relevant sporting competition. And there's some hard conversations, I think, to be had with the WBBL. There's quite a lot of good practice, but we've had even London with all their resources, they played multiple games this year in the gym with nobody there.
Yeah.
Home games, and sooner rather than later, it's stick or twist, I think. Either this is what we're going to be, and this is what we're going to aim to be, or we're going to settle. And I think that's what Krumesh was saying. I think that was really quite interesting. It's nice to hear that type of stuff, because we don't hear anything outside of the quote marks, the smoke-filled rooms. We don't hear what goes on inside the smoke-filled rooms, where all this stuff is decided. And I think it's good that somebody is kind of put their head above the parapet and called it out and said, this is what I think we need to go forward. And if somebody else comes up and says, actually, no, we need something totally opposite, that's fine. Have the argument, have the dialogue, make your decisions.
Yeah.
But, let's just not just kind of hide behind the fact that this is what it is and this is what it will be. And there's no kind of alternative or differing views permitted.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I think they've got, the league has some issues, I think. And I'm not going to say I know enough about it to give her the solutions.
No, me
but
neither.
he clearly does, and he's got a few in his mind.
So Snetsina with 11, Winterburn with 11 and 5 assists, Murray with 10. Tie battle MVP, 2 of 9 for 8 points. Can't be too many MVPs who haven't got double figure scoring, but got the MVP for her effort and her 15,
the MVP was
15 rebounds.
The MVP was the person who pushed the horn at the final buzzer. Sorry, ladies. It was, congratulations to London, not trying to take away from their success or their achievements. They've won another 4 trophies, and they've been demonstrably the best team. And so I'm not trying to take the mickey out of that.
No.
But as a game, that was hard work.
Yeah.
Hard work to commentate on. You tell me.
Yeah.
Shoulder.
Yeah. I was slightly distracted by the pain in my arm, but yes. O'Dwyer with 10, the only Leicester player in double figures. The shooting numbers, we've touched on them. London with 28% from the floor and 24% from 3-point range. Leicester 23% and 16%.
20. Well, that's that's cricket averages. Sorry.
Let's move on to the BBL playoff final, which finished London Lions 88, Leicester Riders 80. We were debating the London starting lineup last weekend. Taylor, Bastoni, Urban, and Zubcic was the five that Ryan Schmidt went with.
Yeah, just before that, yeah, why we? I know you can't answer this question, so it's rhetorical. But why are we taking away half an hour of preparation time for the players for a dunk contest with two players who didn't even play in the BBL this year? To me, maybe the crowd likes it, but we did the dunk contest in March. It seems to me it's a time filler. It's kind of it's a lazy kind of. This is what we're going to do, and we'll do it, and we'll get a few smiles and all that. And it means that the players get half an hour less time to warm up. When you could be maybe doing some other entertainment outside of the court while the players are getting ready. And it actually, I think, has a detrimental impact on the beginning of the games. And more than anything, I think it was just, in this brand spanking new world of entertainment and engagement and content, it's a bit passé. Certainly to do it twice in a year, twice in 3 months. To me, I lost my interest. So that obviously I'm probably not the target demographic either.
Yeah, probably not.
So I'll give that away. But I'd like to have seen just a little bit more invention. If they're going to do some form of challenge, whether it be a shooting challenge, whether it be, I don't know, half-court shot challenge, I don't know, a skills challenge, whatever. But I thought the dunk thing was a bit, after a long WBBL game as well, which went on for a while, and in the presentation, I think that needs to be reviewed. Maybe that would be all shuttled into the All-Star game next year.
Maybe.
So maybe that'll be the solution there. In which case you can do it properly because you have time for it. You're not squeezing it in between two games. If you do it properly with the best people and maybe a bit of prize money, then yeah, absolutely. I'm not that much of a Luddite. But then, so we get to the underprepared teams for the final who get basically half an hour to kind of go on court, and it's not so much that doesn't allow them to shoot the ball. It does, but what it means is they're out their normal rhythm. Every BBL game you get an hour on court before the game. Every BBL game, that's the stipulated period of time, and even if it's not stipulated, everybody understands that's what it is. You get a minimum of an hour on the court. You don't in the finals, and when you don't even know necessarily when you're going to step onto the court. So that everybody's routine changes a little bit, and then they add in the natural kind of heebie-jeebies with it being a final and a big game and all that stuff. And no one makes a shot in the first quarter, and it kind of happens, more often than you can imagine. But to get back to the lineup, yeah, I thought it was a smart move. I thought you had to start Urban, sorry. It went with Best instead of Philip, yeah. Yeah, which I think again was justifiable, albeit Philip had been starting all the games, so obviously Best was to match it with Whelan, and certainly as the season's gone on, London have actually moved towards matching up with the opposition, probably more than just doing what they do. So they've become quite tactical in their adjustments, and you can do that when you've got 10 starting quality players.
Yeah.
The danger is always that it takes away from the rhythm of the team that you've got, and it splits up kind of the Nelson Best pairing coming off the bench, which has been by far the best in the league and a major difference. But ultimately, you're matching up like for like. Taylor for Love, Whelan for Best, Urban for Jackson, etc. And only playing the 4. And so I kind of like that, but what I think we talked about last week did come to pass a little bit, because Nelson Henry had some success against Zubcic.
He did,
and particularly early in a final, whereby you don't want to be 5 out jacking threes early in a final. You want to be getting shots near the rim because they're the ones that generally go in when you haven't had that warm-up time. So they got the ball to Nelson Henry, and he obviously was utterly motivated. It's his last game at 202. I mean, never, that was always a bit of a big issue for London coming in. And I thought Leicester started really quite well, insofar as they kind of played toe-to-toe with London, and they matched up with their starting 5. And and it was helped by the fact that neither team really could make a shot.
First run of the game, late in the first quarter, London going on an 11-2 spell to lead 22-14.
Well, this was ultimately the game, both in the first quarter and the third quarter, because I talked a little bit about it last week. I thought this game was fascinating from a coaching perspective. Probably didn't enjoy it as much. It wasn't a particularly great spectacle, lots of foul shots. But from the way that the coaches matched up against each other and what they did and the decisions that they made, I thought it was utterly fascinating. And you can never look at the game in a kind of entirely on its own. You have to look at what's gone before to kind of put it into context and understand why what's happening is happening. Now, 2 weeks ago, the last 4 or 5 weeks, Evan Walsh has been playing great. Aaron Menzies came back in the semi-final and against Bristol and gave them some fantastic minutes. Against that background, those guys have to play. From Rob's perspective, he can't. He's had enough. There's enough evidence there of that they're going to help the team because they've helped the team previously. That they have to get on court. They have to have a shot. He didn't quite get that far with Bowman. So Bowman was like the 10th guy, Walsh was the 9th guy. But he got that far with Walsh and Menzies. Now, the difficulty was that those last 3 minutes of the first quarter, their lineup was Mackenzie, Walsh, I think it was Menzies, Adekoya, and one of the starters. It might have been Jackson, it might have been Weed, it might have been Loving, whatever. And there was no shot creation in there. They couldn't get it. They couldn't get a good look. And the problem when you can't get a good look offensively is that London can go the other way and get some confidence. And the biggest difference in that was that lineup was matching up against a group with Josh Sharma in. And Josh Sharma was the single fundamental point of difference between these two teams, certainly for the first 3 quarters. He didn't play in the fourth quarter, and I'll talk about that a bit later. But he was a fundamental point of difference between the teams because of he blocked a couple of shots, he threatened a few more, and he's playing against Leicester's second unit, four bench guys who are all in the game. And how you know that what I'm kind of saying is pertinent is at the beginning of the second quarter, Rob came back with all the starters.
Yeah.
He said, look, enough's enough. That's 3 minutes. I can't run this. I can't do that for another 3 minutes because this game won't be there for us anymore. And in fact, I'm quite sure looking back, he'd probably think, oh man, did I have to do that? And the answer was, yes, he did have to do that.
Yeah, he did.
Maybe not. Maybe you put Love back into play with those guys. So you get Love out a bit earlier.
The other thing is, if Menzies goes 3 for 4 from the free throw line instead of 0 for 4 in those first 3 plays, that will you could see how that affected his confidence.
Yeah, I mean, to be honest, you don't. I mean, we're going to get to foul shots eventually, but ultimately, if you're a 7'2" center misses foul shots, that comes with the territory. I know he's a 65% shooter. That still comes with the territory. It's a big game. It's hard. You're coming off the bench. It's a totally new environment. And it does, of course, it impacts your confidence. But, ultimately, you've got to, as a coach, you've got to find a unit that works, and you've got to kill the units that don't work. And that unit didn't work. And as you say, if you make those foul shots, maybe it's different. I get that. But to be frank, a lot of those foul shots would come because one of the things I said, London did not play a very disciplined game. London were in the penalty early in every quarter. I think they played a decent game, but I didn't think they played a smart game at all. For their decision making, their over pressuring, their fouling, their composure and their use of the ball when Taylor didn't have it. Anybody apart from Taylor was generating the offense, and it was kind of watch from behind dark glasses. Oni was scary for me. You know, it could be a dunk, it could be a turnover, it could be anything in between. Nelson really only hardly played because it was foul trouble in the first half and he got 5 minutes in the second half. So their indiscipline hurt them, but Leicester didn't capitalize off that indiscipline. And as I say, the fact that Rob came back at the beginning of the second quarter with his starters was basically enough to say, look, and Walsh never got back in the game. Walsh really didn't do much wrong. He dribbled the ball twice, he turned it over once, and I think he got the shot blocked the second time. But in finals, it's like, hey, I'll apologize to you later. We got to try and do what I can to win now.
So they were 38-24 ahead, London, and as you say, Leicester went back with the starters, having missed a ton of free throws already by that point, and some threes. Jackson and Whelan made 6 free throws in a row, got it back to 38-30, and that was kind of the story of the game. They were just they couldn't close the gap because of all the missed free throws and missed 3-pointers.
Yeah, but London gave them the opportunity. London really, as I say, to give up. I don't think the refereeing was great. I thought it was a little bit stoppy-starty, but other than a couple of calls, there weren't calls that you would say, "What was that?" There was one which there was a phantom call on Zubcic in the third quarter, but other than that, there was quite substantial contact. The times in London have got so many players and they play hard and they play, and they can be physical. What they weren't was very smart in relation to some of the fouls that they committed when they're in the penalty, which against Leicester would have been probably number 2 on my scouting report. One is defend the 3-point line, and the second one is you don't foul in the penalty. You can take the shooting fouls when you're trying to block a shot. You live with that. You can't give them 6 foul shots a quarter when you're as good a defensive team as they are. If you're fouling them 24 feet from the basket, you just can't do it. And they did repeatedly. And fouls on 3-point shots.
Yeah,
I mean, they fouled.
There was 2 twice. Yeah, I love it.
Love shooting 22% or something. And it's not like they haven't got the length to contest that. So there was a ton of mental errors from London. They really did not play even the last play of the first half when 4 seconds to go. I think Oni turned the ball over on a charge when he when they should have kept it for the last shot, and then. Perhaps they haven't watched any of the league all year, but I'm telling you now, Mackenzie is shooting the last shot. We all know that the ball's going to Kimball, and Kimball is going to get to a spot and he's going to rise and reshoot it. And Kimball hadn't made a shot before then.
No.
And part of that is the environment. Part of that is not getting in the game, then coming out of the game again, right? Part of that is not quite knowing which shots you're meant to be shooting because you get trying to work your way into the game. But that shot, that's been his shot all season. Last 4 seconds. 5 seconds, he's going to get the ball. In the vast amount of time, he's going to shoot it. In the vast amount of times, he's going to make them because he doesn't shoot bad shots. So that was a no-pressure shot. And they gave that up because of a dumb charge and then not understanding that he was the guy they had to guard.
Yeah.
And what that does, it's not just 2 points. That gets him into a rhythm. It gets the crowd going. It becomes an 8-point game. Suddenly, he's in a rhythm for the second half. He's feeling good about himself instead of going in at like 0 of 3, thinking, how am I going to get in this game? I've got another 6 minutes before I play again, because I'm not going to get into the 4-minute mark. A player can go from there. Like, player's done. So that stuff from London, I thought was really sloppy at times. Really sloppy. And it was a 75-25 game. It's just Leicester just didn't want to.
So similar at the end of the third quarter. Again, Mackenzie with the last score. Leicester then had 8 unanswered in the first couple of minutes of the fourth quarter, and it was the first time where they really had a bit of wind in their sails. They got it down to 69.
Yeah, I'll just go back a little bit before then. I mean, there was your fun technical. I enjoyed the technical. I'm not going to argue. I mean, I think Zubcic got an absolute howler of a call, but the minute that you do the spectacles sign, and Eddie Dansky's there, you're not getting away with that. And to be fair, nor should you. That was also part of something that we talked about with London about their kind of emotional volatility. And that was Zubcic's 4th foul.
It was, yeah.
And it didn't overly hurt them because, as I say, I think Sharma was. A dominant force in the game, even though he didn't, maybe not on the stat sheet. But you can't do that. you can't lose control of yourself like that. You can't make that sign. You can do the smile, you can do the shrug, you can do the Balkan thing, whatever you want. You can do whatever you want, but you cannot do that. Then Leicester in the third quarter. Leicester starting five again competed. Again, their bench struggled. This time, Love came out with 2 minutes to go instead of like 4 or 5 minutes to go, I think, because he played him with McKenzie. And what was interesting in the whole second half was basically Leicester got smaller and smaller as the game went on. And I think if I was being critical, I would say that I understand why Rob did it, and he went through all his options. It was that's why it was fascinating coaching. It was like a poker player going through this 2, 3, 4, 5 options. He started off with Nelson Henry, played effectively, got a little bit tired. Came back with Menzies in the second half for a couple of minutes, didn't work. Menzies was minus 15 in 7 minutes in the game. Then came with Adekoya as a centre for the end of the third quarter. And then actually came with Adekoya and Nelson Henry for the end of the third quarter. Bit more Nelson Henry, then a bit of Adekoya, and at the end took them all out. They were loving at the 5. So you actually look at the kind of the progress of the game. Leicester got smaller and smaller, which is what you do when you're trying to infuse some energy into your team, when you're trying to pick the pace up. And I think ultimately what cost, it's a tough one, but Rob said afterwards in the press conference, we had a great week. Well, all coaches always say have a great week. But we really, this team's had a number, but we really believed that we had a shot at them. We thought we did the right thing to have a chance. And I've been there in finals where you go in with that mindset, but it's not that you don't have the belief you're going to take them, but that belief fades away quicker when it's not what you need it to be. When you're playing and you're 10 points down and you're 12 points down and you're not getting any momentum and the shots aren't dropping. And I thought the position he got to at the end was basically the 5 guards with Loving as basically a 3-point shooter at the 5. And they speeded the game up. They played so much faster. And I thought that was too late. I thought maybe I wouldn't have. Maybe I'd have gone to that later in the third quarter when maybe after Aaron Menzies comes out and say, right, what's it? Or maybe I wouldn't have put Menzies in the third quarter, gone straight to Adekoya or something like that. And you just never, and this is part of Leicester's issue is actually in a game like as an underdog, it's actually quite difficult or awkward to be a level-headed team.
Yeah. You almost
they don't commit dumb fouls. They played all season, to be honest, at a certain speed. They don't really throw the ball up ahead as much as they used to when, for instance, they had Watson and Jamal Anderson and people like that running. So they've been a very controlled team all season. They know what they're doing. They've been certainly outside of London, the most offensively efficient team, and very close to as offensively efficient as London. But their calling card has been that they've been very, very smart and calm, and they don't let anything get to them. Unfortunately, until Patrick Wheeler made that shot with 3 minutes to go and gave it the fist, and got wound up. He didn't really say any of that because it's not in their character, And as an underdog, that probably actually hurts them. And they haven't been the underdog much in the past 5 years, certainly. Probably since they gave us a tousing at the O2 Arena about 6 years ago. Every final they've been in, they've basically been a favourite till this season. So it's kind of a slight change of mentality for the team. It's very difficult. It's difficult, and I thought that hurt them as well. Now that said, that's talking about Leicester. I also thought London gave them a shot because at the beginning of the fourth quarter, I was surprised with London's lineup on the court. Zubcic came back. I understand that gives Sharma a bit of a break, but they had no Jordan Taylor, no Mia Oni, no Luke Nelson, and it was Mo Sulwade and I think Aaron Best, maybe Josh Ward, Hibbert and Herban, or some level of kind of team of that nature. And I was looking, I think, where's your shots coming from? Who's creating? Maybe Best is going to get going to his left or something, or you're going to throw it to Zubcic. I think Zubcic made a 3, but the lineup that they had when they were up 14 surprised me, because this is that 10 to 15 point margin. If you're up 10 to 15 points going at the beginning of the fourth quarter, in BBL terms, I've always been of the mindset you get your horses on the court. It doesn't matter if they're a little bit. Because if you win the next 3 minutes, that game is done. If you're up 20 with 7 minutes to go, you can ride it the rest of the way. And I know that's not the modern kind of coaching way, and I know that's certainly not the NBA way, because they have 48-minute games, and you have to assume that every game's coming down to the end. But in that game, I thought that they gave Leicester a shot, because first 3 possessions of the fourth quarter was, I think, a turnover, then a 3-point play, and then maybe another shot. I think it was an 8-0 run.
Yeah, it was.
6-0 run. So suddenly a 14-point game becomes a 6-point game. And have that 14 point, and at that point, suddenly Owen's coming back in and Taylor's coming back in. And, had that 8-point game become a 14-point game become a 22-point game, it's done.
Yeah.
So,
and then all of a sudden, both teams managed to knock down a 3, having not really done so that much in the game. The problem for Leicester was they were trading scores, so it was still 8 or 9.
Scores, yeah. I mean, yes, that's right. And it got a little bit shootouty in the fourth quarter, which was good from the perspective of the neutral, because it gave us something to watch, and both teams are going at it. But I thought what happened was Leicester picked up the pace, and then London kind of went with them and played quicker as well. But the biggest thing was Leicester picking up the pace, and getting into stuff quicker. And every time they got a stop, they had to push the ball, and they had McKenzie and Love on the court at the same time, which kind of helped them do that. One thing we missed is after that 8-0 run, in a couple of misses, Jordan Taylor steps around the screen on his left side and drills a 3. That was a massive, massive play. Even though Leicester come back with a couple, that was a massive play, taking a bit of control. And it got into that kind of speed of game that you need to play if you're playing from behind.
Yeah.
When you're playing from behind, you have to play faster. You can't just keep, because you have to do something to make the other team uncomfortable. And Leicester went smaller, and with the 2 guards. I thought basically Leicester, if you would, the story of this game is when Love wasn't on the court, Leicester struggled to create shots offensively. Love was, I thought, really took the lead defensively and offensively for them.
I mean, it's been said, not just by us, but by others as well, that the ceiling of Leicester was on Love, and where he got to in that game compared to where he was even 6 weeks ago, sort of thing, it's a credit really how well he performed.
He did. The only thing you say is, your point guard can't be 5 of 10 from the line.
Yeah.
And that's the biggest knock. But he doesn't even have to make shots, but he can't be 5. He can be 7 of 10. But he can't be 5 of 10. If you're a point guard in a final like that. But ultimately, I thought the minutes that he went out, if you watch them back, Leicester really struggled against London. But when he was in the game, he was able to create shots with a minimum of fuss, really. Got into the middle, kick it out, 2 pass rotations, and there's nobody there, and they've got wide open 3s. And they weren't really knocking them down. So, yeah, they just didn't quite go away, and London kept doing daft things to allow Leicester to kind of.
So a minute and a half to go. It's still an 8-point game. Then McKenzie hits a 3, 83-78 with 1:16 to go. Then he makes a great play on the ball, which, even though London kept possession, they were scrambling and ended up with a 24-second violation with 51 seconds left.
Yeah, and at this point, the fun thing from the coaching perspective for me was that London had matched up with Leicester. And I said before when we started this, that London had been matching up with teams all season. So Ryan Schmidt sees McKenzie, Love, Jackson, Loving, and Whelan on the court. And suddenly you've not got no Zubcic and you've got no Sharma. And Sharma didn't play the whole fourth quarter. And I have to say, the whole fourth quarter, I was thinking, where's Sharma? I really was thinking, this guy has made such a difference defensively. Then even if he's got kind of no one to mark, no one to guard, and he did for most point. Had Adekoya and Nelson Henry in. I'm thinking, well, I played 21 minutes as well, but I was thinking, you know, I get in. But instead, rather than trying to kind of leverage an advantage with his big guy, London decided to match up with him. So suddenly Ward Hibbert's in the game at the end. Now Ward Hibbert hardly hasn't played that much. He's no harm in him playing at the end, but that kind of neutralizes London's advantage insofar as Zubcic having those stretch guys who can shoot at the 5 spot. And it means that it's basically a bunch of guards against a bunch of guards. And that allows Leicester to speed up the game. And, you know, I remember it because it's what we did. We did 7 years ago, you know, with having a bunch of guards. We were down 15 against Leicester, put a bunch of guards on the court. Thompson and Defoe never saw the court again. And the game speeds up and suddenly you make shots and the momentum kind of carries you forward. And Leicester did the same thing. And that got them close. And I'm not sure. If I'm London, I'm not sure I'll do that. I was watching it thinking, I'm not sure I quite like Sharma on the court.
So 40 seconds to go. Love drives in, kicks out, Loving with the shot. Still not quite sure how that one didn't go in. It seemed to defy gravity, rattled about
Didn't go
halfway
in
down.
because that was the ultimate shot of a team that's lost to a team 5 times. It's just in the stars. You know, it's one that they hadn't got a rhythm all night. So obviously, what you know, Loving hadn't made one from the corner, I think, but that was about it. And he struggled a bit against London this year to get going. Loving. It was a great look. You know, it makes it a you know probably a 50, not a 50, maybe a 60-40 game if it goes in. And you're right. I mean, it was not halfway, it was 3/4 of the way down. At the point whereby the 3 people watching the game with me, everyone got off the sofa at the same time, you know. And that was in my view was kind of, and this is what I'm saying. If you're going to give that shot up to Loving, you may as well have Sharma in the game. You know, if you're going to guard people 5, you can't be giving them that shot, you know. So it didn't go in, and that was it.
That was the margins, really, because if that goes in, it's 83-81. Leicester are up. There's 40 seconds to go, and maybe it's doable, but it comes out, and London have enough of a cushion, make some free throws, and that's basically it.
Yeah, what I will say is, I mean, you know, I had a number of flashbacks during this game, and again, people probably won't remember and won't care, but the other flashback to the 69-59 nonsense that you referenced last week, the 2012-13 playoff final where Leicester had beaten us all season and we just couldn't make a shot. And it seemed like it was going to be that the first half. You know, by London, we're just going to win a little bit of the women's game. I also had a flashback to actually the final year before, which was we won the sweep that year, and it was kind of the first year that Leicester really, with Cameron Rundles.
Oh, at NIA, and they missed all those free throws in the fourth quarter.
They missed a ton of free throws.
I think they were like 0 of 12 in the fourth quarter. Or
they were something like that. Yeah, and Drew. So, and I think there was 6 of 20 in the game, and you can't, you know. And there was 2 things to that as well. That was a team that was again that year they hadn't really got over the hump against us. We'd been the better team, and the year after, when they were the better team, we hadn't been able to make those shots. And so what happens in the season does feed in. I've seen too much of it now to believe that it's just coincidence, that you can just say, we forget everything, throw it out. It's one game. It's, you know, and whether that's, you know, whether that's why they shot 21 of 37 from the foul line, I don't know, but it's happened now too often, you know, in such circumstances, thereby it becomes a debilitating things like, can we, you know, it's almost like you're trying too hard. I have to make this. We have to play the perfect game to beat this team. You know, we can't be, you know, we have to be so sure about this. And you don't play with the degree of freedom that you need to do that. And Leicester didn't play with that freedom, I thought, until it went really small at the end. And then they pushed the pace. They made some threes. Whelan got his fist going, and the whole thing, the energy kind of picked up. But they ran out of time for that. So I'd have loved to have seen them start it a little bit quicker. But then again, you know, at the end of the day, if Loving makes that shot, that means they will have been 12 points up in the fourth quarter in 9 minutes, because they were down 14 at the beginning of the fourth quarter. Yeah. So it's difficult to criticize and say you could have done this, you could have done that. In the fourth quarter, maybe at the beginning, maybe in the end of the third quarter. Maybe the end of the third quarter could have started a little bit earlier, but then again, who knows? I mean, it's it's all. At the end of the day, it's all stuff for me to talk about and you to talk about, but no one knows what the real answer is going to be.
So Taylor with 15 points, 5 rebounds, 7 assists, 2 steals for the MVP. Best was 15 points, only 5 of 15 for 14 points, 10 rebounds, 5 assists.
He's your ultimate kind of yes, no, yes, no. I mean, he fills a stat sheet. He is, athletic as anything. He gives you so many positives. But his decision making at times in this game, was less than superlative. I think you'd probably say, and as I say, that doesn't really matter as much when he's playing in a 3-and-D role on the wing. But when he's basically playing the 4 spot, so he's having to handle the ball a bit more, and they don't have Decker, who would be that guy, then he's got more decisions to make. And I mean, just look, you kill to have him on your team. There's times you may want to kill him. Don't put it that way. But in recent stats, ultimately, I thought Sharma was actually the biggest difference.
Leicester were led by 20 points, 9 rebounds, 4 assists from Jackson. Love had 17 points, 7 assists, 3 steals. McKenzie, 13 points, 8 rebounds, 14 points off 50% shooting in his final game for Darian Nelson Henry.
It says a lot about Zach Jackson, doesn't it? That I haven't mentioned him in half an hour, and he's 20 and 7.
Yeah.
20 and 9. So it says a lot about how good he is, because it's just a given, So apologies to Zach for
and the stats that were decisive: Leicester 5 of 24 from 3, 21 of 37 from the free throw line. Leicester during the course of this season shot 79.9% from the free throw line in all competitions. If they had shot that in this game, they would have got an extra 8.5 points in a game they lost by 8. And obviously, if they shot their average in threes, they'd have got another 12 points. But the threes are slightly more sketchy than the free throws.
Threes are sketchy because you're playing against London. You're not playing against, and you're also playing the gym that you've not been shooting in, and the whole thing is very different. But the foul shots is debilitating. I don't know. I actually, this is why there's a 75-25 game, because London gave them a shot. And you cannot commit. You cannot let Leicester shoot 37 foul shots. And I'm not having them put it all on the rest, because it wasn't. Luke Nelson reaching in the second quarter from behind on a semi-fast break when they're in the penalty with 5 minutes to go. You can't do that. There has to be more discipline. And I thought they were fraying a little bit at the end, but they do have substantial and significant togetherness. Coach has managed them really well all year. And they have, as I say, I did think Taylor was the MVP, but he's absolutely standout player, because the game was a different game when the ball was in his hands for London in comparison with anybody else. And he did it at his own speed, in his own time, and with his own kind of composure. That's really, which is that how you carry yourself in a final, really important. He was himself, and he knocked down shots when he needed to. And when they reversed the ball to him, and he kind of knocked down that 3-point shot from the top on the semi-fast break, that was like saying, "Yeah, okay, we're here. We're not losing." One of those shots, where you see, it took it with such certainty. We're not losing. This is our game, and that's what you're looking to. Because if you don't have that, if that head of the snake isn't quite there, or it's a bit turned the wrong way, then the way London were, the flakiness. With some of the temperamental stuff and the fouls, that could have gone the other way.
Yeah.
I thought he was absolutely the MVP in the game. And again, quite chuffed that 3 weeks ago I said, "Oh, I'd quite like to have him on my team." He says backslapping again.
So we talked about Nelson Henry playing his final game a few weeks ago when he announced his retirement. One thing very remiss of me not to mention at the end of the women's game, obviously the last game for Azania Stewart, hanging them up, and a worthy of comment, I think, a career. Just a tremendous stalwart for Great Britain. Obviously played in the Olympics in 2012, done so many things with with the GB women's team over the years, who have been sensational during her time with the
Yeah, I
team.
mean, you're 6 foot. I mean, you're 6 foot. What best part of 6'4" is Anya Stewart. As not as a female player, that is an unbelievable amount of wear and tear on your body. You know, to be, you know, because she played at college before she went, obviously before GB in the Olympics. So you're talking 15 or 16 years, you know, at a high level, whereby everything that the country, certainly in the national team program, everything that's been asked of her, she's done, and with a degree of success. You know, to the point whereby, you know, I'm quite sure they would love it. I'd get out to kind of hang out, get on the plane and go off to the World Championships. You know, so it's unfortunate. Well, I say unfortunate. Everyone has their time, you know.
Yeah.
Everyone says, you know, there's no. But if you're looking at it, you know, in say 15 years, you know, it's one thing if 15 years as a guard. You know, 15 years, 6'3", 6'4", up and down the court, playing in some places which are not particularly salubrious, in gyms, no doubt, of all different levels. But to be able to kind of filter your game, to be ready to play in the biggest games, and to be consistent. And it appears to be extremely well liked.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know Zanius. I've never spoken to her at all. But appears that she's extremely popular around the game. You know, that is an accomplishment. It's always an accomplishment to kind of rise to the top without people being pissed off with you. You know, to use a phrase. Sorry for any kids listening, but we're about an hour in now, so it's probably past your bedtime. I'm sure I've bored you a bit by now. But to do that, it is, you know, generally you make enemies as you rise, you know, so to do that in this competitive environment as a professional sport is, you know, is really impressive.
Not the last we'll see of her, I'm sure, given her second act, it seems. So that brings the curtain down on another season. London with a treble, their first ever playoff success, and doubtless not their last. And obviously they've already sent their signal of intent with Sam Decker signing for 3 years.
Yeah, I mean, there's actually a couple of things, isn't there? One, also Fletcher. I should.
Indeed.
He's my fella, but even so, I shouldn't let that pass without saying, you know, what was his 5,000 points, 2,500 assists, 7 years of basically being one of, if not the very best in the league consistently, which we haven't really seen from a guard, insofar as we haven't seen a guard of that level stay in the league that long. We've seen guards come and go. We've seen really good players play in the league, absolutely. But for 2014 to September 2014 to May 2023, that's the best part of 9 years. He only missed one season, you know. So, you know, we haven't really seen that, and he will be a miss, but I'm sure he will be effective whatever he's doing. And, So and we're not going to get into conversations about who's the best, but of the past 5 or 6 years on a consistent basis, certainly he has been. There's that. Then there is the it was interesting. I mean, I listened to the press conference afterwards. I don't normally listen to the press conferences, and there were some good questions asked, actually. And I don't even like all the journalists, but there you go. No, there's some good questions asked. The one that they asked Rob was the question of you know, how the disparity in resources. How would you handle that going forward? And he basically, I thought he answered very smartly. Basically said, look, it is what it is. We're going to have to everyone's going to have to find ways of getting creative and raising their level and all that type of stuff. What I was slightly disappointed was that no one asked Aaron Raiden the same question. He actually gave some very good answers. You know, he kind of explained the NBL trophy situation, and which I was very much kind of on board with, to be honest, in relation to why they've had to reduce the trophy to what it is next year. But nobody asked him about the disparity and how that affects the league. I thought that was a question that needed to be asked, because I don't know what the answer is yet. I haven't quite figured it out. The All-Star game, they got asked about that, and I think his logic about the All-Star game, whilst I detest All-Star games with every fibre of my being, the logic of it is it drives engagement.
Yeah,
it drives
yeah.
fans get to vote. The NBA does an unbelievable job of kind of driving interest that way. It's a chance to, as I say, to run maybe a proper dunk contest, proper all that other stuff, all sorts of hoo-ha to build the buzz around the league, which, to be absolutely fair to him, is consistent with the message that he's given from the minute that he started.
Yeah.
So I get that. I'm slightly disappointed that we had to lose a competitive final for it. But I also get that it's pretty difficult to fit everything in the way that they want to. When you've only got 10 teams. So that was intriguing, but yeah, going forwards, the elephant in the room is going to be, we can do all these NBA things, but the NBA has a mechanism to ensure that there's sporting jeopardy in place and that teams are on similar level playing fields. And that basically meritocracy wins out, and which franchises and a bit of luck with obviously with the draft and the lottery, but whichever franchises run the best and run the most sensibly, it has a better chance of succeeding. And then there are rules etc. put in place, and we haven't got close to that yet. And it's not a problem because it means London are going to win everything, or London should win everything. That's not the problem. Because and I know that we've had that in British basketball for years.
Yeah.
There are dynasties and teams will go through periods of time where they are the best for various reasons, be it Cadle, be it Kingston, be it Sheffield, be it Newcastle for a while, be it Leicester, whatever. That's the way it kind of rolls. So that's not the issue. The issue is whether that period of dominance is such that it undermines interest in the league. Because you can't, on one hand, try and build the engagement and build the involvement and build everything and absolutely push it to the best place you can be, and then end up having every final being a blowout, or not, that haven't been yet. But for instance, one team winning the league with 10 games to spare or something like that, or a situation whereby, to use a phrase, it's Celtic and Rangers without Celtic.
Although I don't think winning the league is going to be of importance going forward.
You don't?
No, I believe the playoffs is going to be the prize now.
Well, I have difficulties with that.
Yeah.
I have difficulty if that's the case, and we don't need 36 league games. Why are we playing 36 league games? What type of product are we putting? I mean, I get that. If you get to a best of 7 series or best of 5 series, and you maybe have a 20-game league season or something like that, then you can say this is the league builds into the playoffs. That's fine. But if you're asking teams to play 36 games and say, well, it doesn't really matter if you finish top. In fact, the only potential advantage you're getting for not finishing in the top, for finishing the top 4, is that you might get a 3rd game at home. I noticed the quote marks unseeding, reseeding has been binned as well. So from next year, if the 8 seed wins, they'll take on the 1 seed.
Yeah.
But so that's gone as well. So what are we playing for? For what am I watching all these games for? If winning it isn't going to be important, then we're really going to be watching 180 league basketball games a year just so people can decide whether they prefer to finish 3rd or 4th or 5th or 6th. It just I don't. I get that. That's very NBA like as well. I get that. And if you're going to do that, then then you got to look at the signing deadline, because you can't sign people after February, but the most important games are going to be played in the middle of in May. That makes no sense at all. So I think I get the direction of travel, not overly against the direction of travel, certainly not negative towards what they're trying to do. I've been bitching about not having playoff series for years, so could hardly turn around and say that now. And I get that, the model, if the model is the NBA, then you're looking at kind of an entertainment product for the regular season, just like the NBA does.
It's still a trophy, by the way. I'm not saying it's not a trophy. I'm
Yeah,
just
I know
saying
it's a trophy,
the order
but
of the
no, the
importance.
priority is what it
Yeah.
is. You see
And
that
to many people, it's always been that way. We have this argument on Twitter anyway.
yeah.
People go, the playoffs more important. That's
All
not
I'll
what it.
say is,
That's not what it says in league rules. But my understanding is it will
yeah,
say that in league rules going forward.
ultimately it shouldn't be something that can be defined, because people can
Mm.
argue about it for how much they want. But I will know that, when you play in March and in April, and Rob's been there and Fab's been there and whatever, and some of the other guys and PJ's been there. When you play in March and April and your team is injured and banged up, and every loss is and you're playing to get to the top of that league and to win that league, and you win the league on the day of the final season, on the final day of the season, or if you're Terrell Myers and you make that shot, the 36 games way up in it. They lead into that moment, and you're putting it, and that's a bit different to if all right, well, actually, we're just gonna, we don't really need to win the league. We're gonna finish third, so you just sit out for 3 weeks. Charles, you just have a bit of a break, and we'll get you back for the players, because that's all that matters. I don't think that's the best way of leading. I don't think that's the best way of selling the sport. I don't think that's the best way of creating interest. And I think it's so. You wouldn't want to get to the kind of the NBA world of load management, would you? Not
No,
the BBL.
no.
I mean, you can't. Oh, he's not playing today, but whatever. And London kind of got there this year, but London could do that because they had so many games. To be fair to them, and also they had so much talent. But when we look at resources, and I'm coming back to the resources point a little bit, which is ultimately I think it's going to be the biggest factor in the success or otherwise of the process that's going on at the moment, which is how quickly those other teams can kind of stack up and match up and compete. The reason London won that final wasn't actually because of the team they recruited in the summer. Because at Christmas they were able to sign Jordan Taylor, Maya Oni, or just before Christmas, and because all season they were able to had the resources to be able to keep Tariq Phillip.
Yeah.
Who had 12 points as well. And now no other team in the BBL could have done that. No other team in the BBL could have done that. And certainly no other team in the BBL could think at Christmas, this ain't going that well. Let's go and get a EuroLeague point guard and an NBA wingman. Oh, by the way, he's got a British passport too. They couldn't do that. So there's, and I'm not suggesting anything you can do about that, other than be very cognizant of any particular tweaks in the rules and the ability or the playing conditions that you can make to allow the other teams to be as creative and flexible as possible. So when Rob says we have to be more creative and flexible, etc., why have we got a signing deadline at the end of February? That needs to be blown away. All right. If Leicester get an injury, if Carrington Love gets injured, or VJ King did get injured or someone like that, a couple of injuries, we can't bring in a replacement. Everything that you've played for all season, you haven't got your best team at the end. How fair is that? And you can't recruit anybody else. Now in the NBA, you have playoff rosters. You obviously have you have a trade deadline, but you also have playoff rosters. So you can sign players up to a certain date on two-way contracts, that type of thing. And then you have to sort of stipulate your playoff roster. So that's where we should be going. If we're going to be emphasizing the playoffs, well, teams should be allowed to sign players up until the point of the playoffs. And to make sure that the whole season doesn't disappear because you get a couple of twisted ankles at the wrong time. And those are the type of tweaks that I think the league has to be alive to try and retain a level of competitiveness between the teams whilst London are doing what they're doing and trying to progress the sport in Europe.
Yeah.
And I get that. And there are twists and turns. There are things that that can be accomplished to assist the other teams. Whether people have got their heads on enough to see that as a problem, I don't know. It's not yet been addressed as an issue. In a perfect world, I've previously said, I think some form of luxury tax, which again is what they have in the NBA. So it's not counter stuff when you're dealing with
Broadly
massive
speaking, we had one. We got rid of it last year, but there we go.
salary tax,
It was,
salary cap.
yeah, but it was basically a luxury tax if you looked at it, basically.
Really?
Yeah, it
Well, I
was.
didn't
Yeah,
know
yeah,
that.
yeah, basically.
All right. Well, anyway, I think that yeah, they've got work. There's work to be done, but overall, I'm probably beginning of this year, it was all about what's it going to take. How competitive can you really be with a team that's spending 15 times what you're spending or
Mm,
whatever it is? And we didn't know, and we were
mm,
quite intrigued to find out. And I'm not down on it. I'm not negative about it. I don't think at the moment. I think it's got a shot. But I think the league needs to be sharper in relation to giving other teams opportunities and to kind of meet things, to kind of catch up. But I wouldn't. But I'm probably a little bit more optimistic now than I was at the beginning of the season
mm,
that it can work. Not sure it will. The one thing I will say is that we played the first O2 final at 2015 against London,
mm,
and that was basically, other than 300 Newcastle fans and probably 50 London fans, that was a neutral crowd.
mm,
And that game when you look at that game on Sunday, that was a London crowd.
mm,
And you look at the culture that they are doing something with the culture around London, and the BBL's failed in London for so many years, probably since London Towers has failed, but no one's been able to kind of grab hold of what it could be. And the engagement and the stuff that's going on is really quite encouraging from that perspective, that they're building something in London. Now, hopefully what everybody is smart enough to understand is that what you do to build a sport in London is not necessarily what you do to
no,
build a sport in Plymouth,
yeah, yeah.
or to build a sport in Sheffield, or build a sport in Newcastle, or because the BBL has basically for the past 30 years been a provincial league,
Mm,
being teams in the provinces who have had the most success, and that's not because those teams were doing things wrong. That those teams are actually doing things well, but they were doing them well in line with competitiveness, in line with adjusting to their own market and their own
yeah,
needs.
yeah, yeah.
Whereas when you get to an NBA setup, where an NBA is very much one size fits all, you get the same experience in every venue. And that's because they're all in massive cities in America, or basically massive cities, and they all have a substantial amount of they have very well off fan bases. So the tickets are $100, $150. It is an event to go to, and the demand outstrips the supply.
Mm,
So it's all there. You don't have that in this country. That is not going to be there. Can you get to that? Well, you can, but we've got no venues to get those 11,000 people into.
yeah, 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 yeah.
So yeah, there's that the sensitivity between the 777 developing the Lions brand and doing a great job of it and getting it across and spending whatever money they're comfortable with, and which is their right, to develop a basketball scene in London and the reputation on the continent and all that stuff. But that's fine. But then how does that compare with the 777 rule in basically needing the league to expand and the
Mm,
league to succeed as well?
mm,
That is riding along now. Then what they're having to do is, ride along a wire on top of Niagara Falls in the wind without a bar,
mm,
trying to kind of work out how to compete, how both those London can compete in EuroLeague, but the league can thrive.
mm.
How does that happen? How can they make that happen? And that, I think, ultimately is what the judge of their
The
success
challenge
will
going
be.
forward, yeah,
The challenge
indeed.
will, because it's the league that will ultimately, if we're ever talking about a return for 777 on the money that they've put into the league, which is 7 million, and goodness knows how much they put into London, the return will come from the league.
Mm,
Not going to come from the club. You know, they might save some losses, but you know, Olympiacos aren't making money. Fenerbahce aren't making money. Barcelona, Real Madrid aren't making money off the basketball team. You know, it's a loss leader for whatever reason, and it's very difficult to see how London could change that. So it's going to come from building the league, making the franchises palatable, and maybe selling more franchises, expanding the league, which we all want. Obviously, there's 2 franchises out there at the moment in Plymouth and Manchester, and getting returns for them, building the values of the clubs, and potentially selling the clubs on, like they do it again, like they do in the NBA. So that's the test. And I think I'd have probably asked Aaron Reardon that question, but I was in Newcastle.
That's why you're not in the.
I'm not in the press. I'm not in the press room. Sorry, I've talked a lot.
So that brings us to the end of another season, and we will look forward to next year. Who knows, Dave? We might even come back for season 4. We will see.
Well, you know, I mean, that wire across Niagara Falls.
Yeah,
that may be my marriage.
You've got all summer to salvage it.
And this show,
yeah.
Yeah, I mean, obviously you have to hope the games will need to be online before we can do this. If the games aren't online, then this really doesn't hold much kind of appeal, I don't think, because you can't talk about them. Let's hope for a nice healthy off season and be rested up. Indeed. And if people beg loudly enough on Twitter, maybe
we'll come back.
Just on that though, thank you everybody for listening. Thank you all for the feedback that we get, which is appreciated, because it does seem like at times, you know, you kind of talking to the wall a little bit.
Yeah.
You know, that includes you know, the old man shouts at cloud, that type of thing.
Yeah.
That includes any of the coaches who have yet to detest me. Any of the refs similarly, who are still willing to tolerate and listen. All the people around the staff, all the staff around all the clubs, who put the time in, and more than anything else, the volunteers.
Who
make the sport work. Because you know, they do an incredible job out of the love of it, and at times we can get all lost up in the money and all that stuff, but the reality is it's all about the people in the community. And if we can add a little bit of spice and a little bit of fun in the meantime, all well and good. But thank you everybody for listening, and thank you for your feedback. And as I say, we'll consider the financial options for next year.
Indeed,
who's going to offer the biggest
which network
biggest signing on bonus?
So on that bombshell, as Dave says, thank you very much for listening through the year, and for all the people who've come up to us and said, "Oh, I really enjoyed the podcast and the stuff we get on Twitter." We really do appreciate that. We're going to go have a lie down in a darkened room. I'm about time to take some more painkillers, but we will hopefully be refreshed and back in the autumn. We'll see. Maybe there is a season 4 in us, but for now, have a great summer. We'll see you next year. Goodbye.